Good morning. So, you're Vera, right? I'm Trucy. Trucy Wright. That's right with a W. But not Bright, right? We're on your side. You can tell us anything, please. Good morning. She speaks. Not bad, not bad. But I think you'd do better with a little smile, you know? You're so pretty. You need to sell yourself, you know? Trucy, let's take it easy for starters. Thank you for taking my case. Okay. Well, that's a start, I guess. There she goes with the nail polish again. That's great, really. It's so cultured. Want to try? Ooh, really? Girls. The victim, Drew Misham, was a forger, and a stolen painting was found in his studio. A life of crime, really. And maybe one that led to his death. Well, we will now, begin the, trial of Vera Misham. Is the judge okay? His voice is all raspy and he's looking around all nervous-like. The repercussions of today's trial will most likely be felt for a long time, and may indeed alter our legal system forever. Today is a test of the jury system, and the first step toward a new order in our courts. Daddy's secret mission. The jurists will function like a jury. It is hoped their inclusion will help the courts to better reflect the people's will. Why aren't there any jurors in the courtroom? 30 closed-circuit cameras watch this courtroom at all times. The jurors have access to everything that transpires. Jurists! Judge Well and Judge Cool. Now she here, Prosecutor Gavin. I was going to say that. My apologies, Judge. Judge today's trial coolly, if you would be so kind. The jurists are unbound by the letter of the law. They don't affect the trial with evidence, but by their feelings. And we're about to find out just what effect they're going to have. Very well, Prosecutor Gavin. The details of the case, if you would. The victim is the painter, Drew Misham. He was killed in his own studio. His coffee was poisoned. By whom, you ask? By none other than the defendant, Vera Misham. Objection! There wasn't any poison in the coffee. A tongue. Someone has been doing their homework. Indeed, poison was not present in the coffee, but on the mug itself. The mug? Residue was found in the rim, I see. The autopsy report describes the manner of our victim's death. The court accepts this as evidence. According to this report, the victim's death was caused by atrochlorine poisoning, a chemical compound that does not occur naturally. Lethal dose is a mere 0.002 milligrams. A touch of atrochlorine in the body is the touch of the Reaper's scythe. Very well, Prosecutor Gavin. You may present your witness. I have for you today a simple man for a simple case. A man who witnessed the murder in its entirety. That journalist, no doubt. The witness will state his name and occupation. Right. Well, for starters, my name is Spark Brushel. My job is a lone observer of the world. In other words, a freelance journalist, right? If you don't mind, I'd like to state something here for the record. Yes, Mr. Brushel? I dislike conclusions, specifically the aspect of jumping to conclusions. Preconceptions make Park Sandbox of endless desert waste, end quote. But you are a journalist. You said so yourself yesterday. Well, that's true, yes. But you must understand, I stand before you today a man with a dream. I'm offering you this testimony in exchange for exclusive rights to the story. Scoop turns Mr. Brushel into that Mr. Brushel, end quote. Let's hear your testimony then, shall we? A simple case, eh, Gavin? For me, the jury is still out. I visited the studio around 9 o'clock that night to do the interview. The first outsider to enter the atelier. Journalistic history made, end quote. His daughter brought us coffee right after we started. And you know what happened next? Star falls, end quote. No one else entered the room besides her the whole time. That does sound like a simple case. Unless you were the one who poisoned him. Whoa, what are you saying? Judge! Ahem. Need I remind you, the cameras are rolling today. I felt the need to be a bit dramatic. You didn't do it, did you? Me? Do a thing like that? Come on! That's like newsmaker making the news, end quote. Or even contemporary witch hunt, end quote. I know, wild accusations rock courtroom, end quote. Rock indeed. Prosecutor Gavin sure looks like he's having fun. I'm so happy for him. Very well. Mr. Justice, your cross-examination, please. What's this about a star falling? Star falls, huh? It's like an old telegram. Send money over. Zowie, you don't know? That's like a journalism code word. An important person is passes away, a star falls. Get it? There's no gravity in space, is there? I wouldn't think stars could fall, really. Does this matter? Oh boy, this is good stuff. Good stuff. How about star breaks? Nah, lacks punch. I know. Star dies. Lacks imagination. Of course, you could go with Drew dies, straight to the point. I like it. I think we need to hear about something a little more substantial. You say Mr. Mission had the coffee, too. But did you actually see him drink the coffee? Of course. He who sees it wins, but he who says it wins bigger, end quote. I live in the man sees dog eat dog and writes about it world. Yet? I guess I can't say I saw him drink it, really. He had one so-called sip, if that. Man puts lips to mug, drinks, end quote. That poison is quite virulent, I hear. My stomach did a so-called somersault. Since I gulped down that coffee without so much as a second glance at it. Wait, maybe something's there. Some kind of so-called trick. Anyone want to venture a guess, for the record? Does this guy have a pause button? Well, Mr. Justice, did you find that testimony valuable? The victim drank his coffee, then immediately fell over. Oh, yes. You can go to press with that one. Your Honor, this is a vital piece of information. Please add it to the testimony. Very well. The witness will add this to his testimony. Vital, right. He had one sip, if that. The next moment, he was on the floor. You know what I have a problem with? A particular property of the poison used, the troconine. Oh, Prosecutor Gavin was quite clear about the poison. A lethal dosage of 0.002 milligrams paralyzes the central nervous system. If you drank that, even you, Mr. Justice, would be reduced to a quivering pile. Why are you using me as an example? Unfortunately, we weren't told everything. There was a vital omission in Prosecutor Gavin's information. An omission? The troconine is as virulent as he says, but death doesn't come upon ingestion, not immediately. That's because the troconine is slow-acting. Slow-acting? What? According to one forensic scientist. It's one of the most virulent poisons, but is absorbed in the body astonishingly slowly. It takes at least 15 minutes from the time of ingestion for adverse effects to show. If we suppose that the moment Mr. Misham sipped the coffee was when he sealed his fate, then he would still have had time left to enjoy his last cup of joe. Order. What's the meaning of this? If what the defense says is correct, why, that contradicts the entire testimony we've just heard. Well, Mr. Russell, anything to say on the record? Slow acting. S-L-O-W-A-C-T. It was virulent, alright. Even then, it had already been emptying his closet with the journalist. He's working on a scoop.
Objection!
It's Brushel, yeah? Herr Brushel, let's take a trip back down memory lane. Huh? Did the victim really die the instant he took a sip? Think it over. This is vital. You know what I think? I think that was a not-so-subliminal suggestion, end quote. I admit it does cause a problem if he died when you say he died. I would be forced to say auf Wiedersehen my simple case. And you would be forced to say farewell to your article. Come again? You can't write a story based on conjecture, can you? And as the case drags on, other reporters will pick up the scent. And you'll be forced to kiss your exclusive scoop goodbye. Scoop! Scoop! Look, wait, just wait a second, just 1 second. We're waiting. Out with it. I think I just recalled a so-called important detail. A revival of recollection, end quote. A story survival, end quote. Turning utterly confused, end quote. Actually, I did notice something when I visited the studio. I heard of poison that takes its sweet time, see? But not what I have been saying for the last few minutes, apparently. Mr. Brushel, are you saying you noticed something that explains what happened? You bet I am. The antidote for a poison's contradiction, end quote, you might say. Or, I still have no idea what you're talking about, end quote, I might say. I figured it out, but only after an in-depth interview. See, thanks to my journalism skills, I know who poisoned that coffee. Order! As far as I can tell, the witness is standing by his testimony. That Mr. Misham died the instant after he drank. Of course I'm standing by my testimony. Am I dreaming of exclusive rights to the story? I suppose it was too much to hope for. What was? Of course he wouldn't choose a simple case. Not him. Him? Phoenix Wright. Who else? A tongue, Brushel. Report for us if you would. What is it that you noticed? This court is a critical trial of the jury system. I'm afraid no room for doubt is permissible. You will testify to the court about what you noticed. When I arrived at the studio, Mr. Misham was at his desk. He seemed to be writing a letter, but he quickly sealed the envelope. I thought nothing of it at the time, of course. Now that I think about it, what if he was writing a suicide note? A suicide note. Yes, he had this look on his face. Man's face inscrutable as a quadratic equation, end quote. Suicide? Poor Mr. Misham. But that means Vera's innocent. Would someone commit suicide in the middle of an interview? Oh. Very well. You may begin your cross-examination. So he put the letter away when he saw you? Early reporter gets warm, end quote. That's my secret. I'm not sure I follow. It's the night of the interview. I arrive 15 minutes ahead of schedule. The handle turns, the door opens, and I barge in. Are you sure that's okay to do? I mean, isn't that unlawful entry, really? Mr. Misham sure seemed to think so. You should have seen him. He crammed his letter to that yellow envelope as fast as he could. I know a secret when I spot one, and that was one. Does seem significant. Well, Mr. Justice? I wonder. It does have the ring of something important. The defense finds this testimony vital, Your Honor. Very well. Please add it to the testimony, then. Hey, why not? My account comes free of charge. It was a yellow envelope. I heard it was left at the crime scene. As it just so happens, there was a single letter in a desk drawer at the scene. In a red envelope! What?! Prosecutor Gavin. Yes? Was a yellow envelope found at the scene of the crime? Unfortunately, no. But at forehead. It's easy to mistake the color of an envelope. I guess. But not this envelope. You see, it was postmarked already, 7 years ago. Well, Mr. Brushel, I can explain that. Drew, right? You want to get that letter in an envelope, pronto. Get it out of sight of my beady eyes, right? So he grabbed the nearest envelope and crammed away. And what about the whole red and yellow envelope contradiction, chump? Well, Mr. Justice, have you anything to say to the witness's claim? That night, the victim put a letter he had been writing in a red envelope. That's impossible. Ah, I like your expression. So full of confidence. It's simple, really. As it just so happens, the defense team investigated the contents of this envelope. With, the assistance of a forensic scientist. What? Note that this letter is addressed to Drew Misham. Oh? Why would he address the letter to himself? Let alone send a suicide note to himself. I've been scooped! Order, order, order! Mr. Brushel, can you explain this to the court? Oh, my. How could I have forgotten? I suppose this happens to the best of us. Reporter gets old, forgets lots, end quote. I'm still waiting for an explanation, Mr. Brushel. Well, that's the thing, see? After he put his letter in that envelope, Mr. Bishop sat there searching his desk drawer for something. His desk drawer? Yes, a stamp. A so-called postage stamp, end quote. A stamp? Whatever for? Well, to mail his letter, what else? And then, why yes, I think I saw him put it in his letterbox. Yes, it was a yellow envelope, and he put it in that box. Well, apparently, this yellow letter has nothing to do with this case. Oh, how I wish it did. Just think if that were a suicide note. What a story. Star writes suicide note in front of reporter. Files, end quote. Ahem, as I was saying, that has nothing to do with this case. That said, yes, Your Honor? It makes me wonder about the contents of that red envelope. $100,000 is quite a good deal of money. So this was from 7 years ago, yeah? So am I finished? Am I finished here? I was thinking of, going home to start writing. I hate to state what should be pretty obvious to anyone, but when you catch the scent of a story, you make that, rather unique face. Ah, come on! Attorney has active imagination, little else, end quote. Even I noticed something, and my eyes aren't what they used to be. I'm starting to understand what all this perceiving stuff is about. Judge has active imagination, end quote. Please continue with your testimony. Tell us about the scent of a story. Hey, I'm the one asking the questions here, usually. Actually, it took a bit of work to get a thumbs up on the interview. Reporter leverages story, gets his interview, end quote. The story considered a certain case from 7 years ago. That red envelope probably had something to do with it. Say what you will, but Drew's talent was without compare. So you threatened to go to press with this story. That's how you got your interview? Blackmail? Well, yes. No. No. It wasn't exactly, but I'm not... Something wrong, Mr. Brushel? Look! This is my story. My tidbit. Journalist info is livelihood, end quote. I see. While you have me chatting away in here, what's going on out there? What if some Wally Words with the Sally Scooper gets wind of my story? They could be going to press while I'm going to waste. The court feels your pain, Mr. Brushel. Mr. Justice, let's pick up the pace. A certain case 7 years ago. Wait, 7 years ago? Sweat much, Mr. Russell? Yeah, well. A man can't help his glands, you know. It's more than that. When Mr. Misham's talent was mentioned, you suddenly began to sweat buckets. Ah! You hiding something about his talent. What? That's ridiculous! Evidence time. Let's show where Mr. Misham's true talent lay. It just so happens I have evidence showing the talent mentioned in that letter.
Take that!
This painting was found in Mr. Misham's studio. There are two problems with this painting. The first is it wasn't painted by Mr. Misham. The second is that there was another painting in the studio which looked exactly like this one, except it was only half done. Then we have a letter discussing a payment of $100,000, which suggests a certain business operation. The business of making forgeries. Yowg! That is all, Your Honor. Everyone, please, everyone. Can we keep this private, please? This is my story, my scoop! Forgery. That's a serious crime. Drew Misham is known as an artist these days. But there were rumors he dabbled in another kind of art until a few years back. Another art meaning forgery? Drew Misham was talented, alright. Talented at making precise, detailed fakes. A fact that certain criminal elements were quick to discover. Criminal elements? What? You can't seriously be talking about... Exactly. I'm talking about forging evidence. The rumors started circulating 7 years ago. So 7 years ago? So are we to understand that this letter, this payment of $100,000 was for... Exactly. Forged evidence nets tidy profit, end quote. Order, order, order. Why, it's like our victim was living a double life. Aha, this is my chance. So the victim had ties to the criminal world, right? He could have had plenty of enemies we know nothing about.
Objection!
This is my first time hearing of this criminal world. We certainly found no criminal connections when we conducted our investigation.
Objection!
But how do you explain all this money? You have to admit there's a possibility of some illegal activity here.
Objection!
But there is no proof tying this letter to our case. Our case was and remains simple from the beginning. Only the defendants could have poisoned that mug that night. And you, of course. Hey, hey, hey! The only thing I poison is my pen when I'm writing reviews! Mr. Brush, your testimony to this point has been quite unreliable. It doesn't speak well of your reporting acumen. What are you talking about? My journalism is rock solid. Journalism is so solid, you could stand an elephant on it, end quote. In any case, let's hear a summarized recap of your testimony. If we can ascertain the situation in that studio from the recap, the trial is over. Apollo, what's he talking about? The cross-examination showed Mr. Russell didn't have reason or means to poison him. As long as there are no other suspects, then the killer had to be Vera, that's what. This next testimony is our last chance. Mr. Brussel, your testimony, please. The only other person in the studio that night was the defendant. It was Vera who poured the coffee. She's admitted as much herself. The only thing that touched Drew's lips during the interview was that mug. And nothing left that studio after he died. Nothing. Clearly, the only one who could have poisoned him was his daughter. A nice testimony. Clear, succinct, and without room for doubt. Ah, shucks. You really think so? I believe this clarifies the situation that night. Very well, Mr. Justice. You may begin your final cross-examination. Right. I still have one trump card left to play. And I won't let this trial end until I use it. The only other person in the studio that night was the defendant. It was Vera who poured the coffee. She's admitted as much herself. The only thing that touched Drew's lips during the interview was that mug. And nothing left that studio after he died. Nothing.
Hold it!
Not one thing? You're sure? Yep, sure as sure can be. Well, with one exception. One exception? What? Journalist Spock Brussel does interview, leaves studio, end quote. Come on! It's a joke, get it? Not funny, I know, but still. Did something leave the studio that night? Why does that sound familiar? Where have I heard something like that before? Now that we've proven our witness is a comedian of sorts, I'd like to turn to our defense attorney before returning to the testimony. Do you have any idea what, if anything, might have left the studio that night? I think one thing might very well have left the studio that night, actually. A certain something that has vanished from the crime scene. By which you mean... something other than our witness? Of course. Don't tell me. Venomisham? Believe me, any comic relief I may provide is entirely unintentional. Then let's see what you got for us, Mr. Justice. Well, this thing wasn't at the scene of the crime, so I can't show it to you. But I do have evidence that shows how it could have been taken from the scene. This is the only link between that studio and the outside world. A letterbox? What did Mr. Brushel just tell us? When he entered the studio on the night of the murder, the victim had just finished writing a letter. Yeah, I said that, and yeah, it was true. Furthermore, he went on to tell us that he put the letter in a yellow envelope and put it in the letterbox. Ah! But that very same letterbox was empty. In other words, that night, the yellow envelope disappeared.
Objection!
Ah, yes, intriguing. So an envelope has disappeared from the scene of the crime. Of course, this changes nothing. Huh? He has a point, Mr. Justice. What we're trying to figure out here is how the poison got onto Mr. Misham. Is it really important that this envelope the witness says you saw disappeared? Well, if it did disappear, then something did leave the studio that night. That seems very important to me. Very well then, the witness will add this to his testimony. You got it. I still think this fails to change anything, Airforehead. I wouldn't be so sure. A letter disappeared from the crime scene that night. This is exactly the opening I've been looking for. A letter was put in the post from the studio, but I hardly think that matters. The only thing that touched Drew's lips during the interview was that mug.
Hold it!
You're sure about that? Well, to be really, really precise, I was busy gobbling mint candies the whole time. One of those candies might have been poisoned.
Objection!
Yet, at the time of the autopsy, no fresh fragrance of mint filled the room. And no mint residue was found. It was a long shot anyway. Don't tell me you're still trying to prove this. You think the victim ate, drank, or otherwise ingested something other than coffee? Well, Mr. Justice, if you have some proof, the possibility is there. I can feel it. Just maybe not prove it. Not yet. And possibility isn't going to cut it. Not now. Mr. Misham ingested that poison via a route other than that coffee. Proof is possible. Here goes nothing. You do understand what we need, yeah? Proof, Airforehead, not possibilities. Of course. And Prosecutor Gavin, I hope you understand. I'm ready to give you that proof. What did you say? I have proof of the disappearing envelope. I saw him writing the letter, I did. Which was picked up by the mailman, I assume. Of course, which means that envelope had a stamp on it. A stamp. Ah! As we all know, stamps come with dry glue in the back. In order to use the glue, you'd have to wet it by licking the stamp.
Objection!
Feh. No one would have thought you actually lick stamps in this day and age.
Objection!
Even if you wanted to talk to him, you couldn't. He's dead, after all.
Objection!
Okay, so he licked the stamp. But wait! How does that explain the atropine on the rim of the coffee mug?
Objection!
If you lick the back of a poisoned stamp, the poison would get in his tongue, yes? What would then happen if you put the coffee mug to his mouth? Those traces on the mug weren't the killer's doing, it was the other way around. What? The coffee mug didn't poison Mr. Misham. Mr. Misham poisoned the coffee mug himself! Order, order, order! But that doesn't, does it? Recall if you would. A Trocodine is a slow-acting poison, yes? The poison entered his body when he put the stamp on that envelope. But his time wasn't up until the very moment he touched his lips to that cup of joe. You have something to add, Mr. Brushel? Uh-oh, his nose is picking up another scent. As I believe I mentioned earlier. Well, that's the thing, see? After he put his letter in that envelope, Mr. Misham sat there searching his desk drawer for something. Yes, a stamp. A so-called postage stamp, end quote. But you know, I don't seem to remember him ever finding one. Maybe he just ran out? Incidentally, we searched the desk drawer at the scene of the crime. There were no stamps. Not a single one. That does pose a problem. How will you prove that the stamp was coated with poison? Actually, I'm glad no other stamps were found. It makes proving the stamp he used was poisoned possible. Good show, good show. You can't even prove there was a stamp at the scene in the first place. Well, let's hear what the defense has to say anyway. Where's your evidence that proves the existence of this poisoned stamp?
Take that!
Well, that certainly is a cute little frame, and by little I mean really little. It was on the victim's desk, Your Honor. Quite empty, as you can see for yourself. I noticed that too during my inspection. So what? Ah, apparently you weren't as observant as you should have been. You see, when you saw this frame, it was missing something quite important. Missing something? Yes, a pale bluish stain on the inside of this frame. A Trocodine residue. What? Why wasn't I told about this? The frame is only 2 inches square. The face of the frame is even smaller. Maybe an inch wide at most. You aren't saying... Oh, but I am. Tell me, what fits into the small frame? A commemorative stamp, perhaps? Order, order, order! The poisoned stamp was in this frame? Impossible. But Prosecutor Gavin, why would he put something like that on his desk? Don't tell me he had it there so he could commit suicide if the mood struck. You know, can I say something? I had a thought, see? What, Mr. Russell? And please stop jitting around like that. The victim was a forger, right? There's a lot of money in that line of work. Forger forges friends, makes enemies too, end quote. So the poison stamp might have been a murder weapon, aimed at him.
Objection!
Oh, rich. That's rich. Leave the ridiculous flight to fancy to the Gavitters' song lyrics, please. Finally, something we agree on. The stamp was a murder weapon? Nonsense. Murder is a simple business. Who would go to such lengths? No one. Oh, I disagree. Come again? Recall, if you would, the victim's reclusive lifestyle. Drew Misham hid from the world. He avoided meetings. His only contact with the outside world was the mail. The mail? Now, if you wanted to kill someone you couldn't meet, but you knew read letters, a stamp would be the perfect weapon. Ridiculous. What is your proof? I want proof. Show us evidence that this poison stamp was sent to him as a murder weapon. I might not have evidence, per se, but things are finally starting to come together. Well, what is it, Apollo? Your fists are trembling. I think I know what happened. I don't believe it, but I can see it. I think I know how Mr. Misham was killed. Well, finish it, Mr. Justice. A certain piece of evidence points to the truth, Your Honor. I can show you how someone with the intent to kill sent Mr. Misham the stamp of death.
Take that!
Isn't this the envelope? The one from 7 years ago? Think about the text of the letter again. There were 2 pages in the envelope. This is page 1. And this is page 2. I want to draw your attention to one phrase in particular. Send in the enclosed envelope with the enclosed stamp within 3 days. The enclosed stamp, Your Honor. Ah. In other words, if I have this straight, the stamp, poison, on the stamp, lick, lick, gasp, end quote. Now, what if he had done exactly as the letter asked? He would sign the document, put it in the envelope, and put the stamp on it, right? Then he would put it in his letterbox. 15 minutes wouldn't have elapsed between fixing the stamp and mailing the letter. But the clock started ticking, and when the time came, he drew his last breath. And the murder weapon would be taken away from the scene. Quite conveniently, thanks to the postal system. Such a splendid imagination you have, Air Forehead. Let me confirm one thing with you, if I might. So, this poison stamp was inside this envelope from 7 years ago, yeah? Is that what you have us believe, really? Well, it is a little bit of a stretch, but there's a possibility. Yes, a very small possibility. How small, I wonder? A poison stamp in this envelope. A stamp that then became the murder weapon. How do you intend to prove this seeming coincidence? Well, it was 7 years ago. We don't even know who sent that letter. And your answer is silence, I see. Very well, I move to... It's not nice to become a Fraulein, Clavier. Emma! Well, like my Christoph Gavin impression? Did I sound like him? Don't quit your day job. Don't you have a crime scene to be looking after, Fraulein detective? Someone had to come dig you all out of the mess you're making of this case. Mess? You know, none of this would happen if you just trusted in science a little more. You can find out if that stamp was in that envelope. Easy. Care to explain yourself, Fraulein detective? Glare at me all you want, but science is on my side. It's all in the residue, right? That's right! The poison deduction spray. Produce the red envelope at once. You can open it on the authority of the court. Wow, would you look at that? No mistaking it. That's a trochodine residue. I don't believe it. A murder weapon from the past. Now, 7 years later, it bears its fangs at last.
Objection!
Absolutely outrageous. Tell me why. Why didn't this murder take place 7 years ago? Well, there's one possibility. Maybe Mr. Mission figured it out. Figured what out? He realized that the person who sent that letter wanted him dead. So he sent his reply with a different stamp. And put his decisive evidence in a frame. Ah! You're still here? Can I make a statement here, on the record? I, Spock, raise a toothbrushel, claim the scoop is mine. Drew Mission killed in cold blood by sender of 7-year-old letter, end quote. No, maybe something more succinct. Star falls after 7-year delay, end quote. Order, order, order! I see no room for further argument here. Though I admit, this is all coming as quite a shock. To think that the murder weapon reached his mouth after 7 years. Stamp his ticket straight to afterlife, end quote. Uh-oh. I think the witness is a bad influence on our judge. I see no need for further debate on this matter. The sender of that letter 7 years ago could hardly have been our defendant. Apollo! I think we just won. Very well. This court finds the defendant.
Objection!
Is this the bright future of our legal system? Prosecutor Gavin? A ticket to the afterlife from 7 years ago. Tickets for Gaviners' shows are invalid after 2 weeks. But it doesn't make sense any other way. It boggles my mind that so many people haven't noticed this. There's a fatal contradiction in Air Forehead's claim. A contradiction? A poison stamp was placed in this envelope 7 years ago, whereupon it was framed until now. If that's the case, then why would Drew Misham have done what he did? Emma explained that. He must have realized it was poisoned. Therein lies the rub. 7 years ago, the forger Drew Misham sent the trap and put the stamp in a frame. I do not debate this, but this begs the question. Why, 7 years later, did he use that stamp on the night of the murder? Ah, surely you don't mean to suggest that Mr. Misham simply forgot. He put the murder weapon in a frame on his desk for 7 years and forgot? You expect us to believe he sprang the trap on himself? Are you what? Well, I admit this is all quite shocking myself. It does seem highly unlikely that he would fall foul of a trap that had been sitting on his desk for 7 years. Apollo, I don't think we're winning anymore. I'm glad to see we're all back in the real world now. Welcome back to reality. We've been waiting for you.
Objection!
Okay, then how do you explain the poison stamp that was in this envelope? The poison stamp? What exactly is this poison stamp again? Have you brought it to court for us? I see no proof that such a thing ever existed.
Objection!
What about the atroquinine residue, huh? Oh, I agree. That does seem to be atroquinine residue. But, at Forehead, it's certainly no stamp. Yeah, but even if your precious poison stamp did exist, Drew Misham never would have used it. That is all. Ugh. I believe we've come to a conclusion. Again. Apollo, were we wrong the whole time? I can't believe it. The poison traces match up. It can't be coincidence. I'd like to bring some closure to this issue sometime this year. Mr. Justice? Yes, Your Honor. Let's review the facts and see where we stand. 7 years ago, Drew Misham received a red envelope. There were traces of the poison atroquinine on the document inside that envelope. A similar trace was also found at the crime scene on this tiny picture frame. The defense has indicated a possibility of a yellow envelope. An envelope that left the scene of the crime with the poison stamp on it. Yes, but even if this envelope contained the poison stamp, and Drew Misham, knowing this, put it in a frame, he never would have used that stamp. I'm afraid you're right. Which means there is a fatal flaw in the defense's case. I haven't been on the wrong track this whole time, I'm sure of it. The traces of atroquinine, the envelope, the frame, and Drew Misham's mysterious death. They're all connected somehow. Well, Mr. Justice, do you have a conclusion for us? The defense stands by its case, Your Honor. We've seen that the logical outcome of the evidence makes no sense, which means that one of our clues must be a fake. Ah, fake clue. Fascinating. And if we find this fake, your wild fantasies will prove quite reasonable, yeah? The fake clue that's thrown us off the poison's trail is none other than... The victim was a fake clue? I'm afraid I don't understand. I'll explain. We have an envelope, a frame, and a mug linked by poison. That all makes sense. What doesn't make sense is the victim himself.
Objection!
Congratulations, you've completely lost me. So the fake evidence is none other than the master of fake himself, the forger? It makes a good story, I'll give you that. The fake clue, fakes, forgeries. Ah! I know that face. That's the I just had an idea face. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm going with it anyway. What if our forger is the fake? Come again? 7 years ago, our forger sensed a trap and stepped aside. 7 years passed. Now the forger stumbles into that very same trap and dies. Why? Well, that's what I want to know. Because the forger who was killed was a fake. Here we are again. The victim was a fake. One forger smelled the trap, one forger fell into the trap. That's two forgers, and one of them was a fake! Order, order, order! So you are telling us that Drew Bisham, the victim, was a fake? Well, if he was the fake, who was the real forger? You'd better not be claiming there was some kind of switcheroo. I'm afraid you're going to have to back up your story. Mr. Justice, show us just who the real Drew Bisham was. If Drew Bisham wasn't the real forger, there's only one other person it could have been. Understood, Your Honor. Forger Drew Bisham was himself a forgery. The real forger was...
Take that!
There could be only one explanation, really. The real identity of the forger known as Drew Bisham is none other than his only daughter, Vera Bisham. Order, order, order! Mr. Justice, this is going out on a limb even for you. I kinda agree. I mean, Vera, a forger? Let's consider it before you run it off entirely. If you look at the paintings in the studio, one fact becomes quite clear. Forgery had been taking place in that studio for quite some time. The forger wasn't caught in that trap 7 years ago. This can only mean that the one who was caught in the trap wasn't the forger. Well, actually that does make a certain kind of sense. One more thing. Only 2 sets of fingerprints were found in the forger's studio. Drew Misham's and Vera Misham's. If we know that Drew Misham wasn't the forger, that leaves only one possibility by process of elimination. The forger was Vera Misham. Well, fascinating. Vera Misham. You've been paying attention to the trial so far. Let's just ask her and be done with it, shall we? Who are you? Who is the forger, Drew Misham? Was that an expression of emotion I saw on her face? She's staring holes into Prosecutor Gavin's face. I'm used to being stared at by Fraulein's, believe me. Though they usually talk to me too. Tell us, what are you the one who forged those works of art? Yes. So the forger, Drew Misham, was you? Yes, it was me. What? What? The court was in an uproar, and it wasn't coming down. We had to break for a 10-minute recess. Okay, so where exactly does this leave us, Apollo? Well, the Drew Misham who was killed wasn't Drew Misham the forger, basically. Huh? Well then who was he? Well, he was actually doing her nails. So, you really made those forgeries? Yes, for father. I know, it was wrong. Can you tell us how it happened? My father was a painter. I loved painting ever since I was a child. One day, father saw it in me. He saw that I had the talent. The talent for making forgeries? How should I say it? It was not only paintings I made, given the materials I could make anything. Anything? Father was so proud and I so happy. But in the end, I was making those forgeries. I've never had a good constitution nor personality. I know very little of the world outside my door. Now, because of me, Father is... Do you know about the red envelope? I remember that envelope. It was some time ago. So you were already, You were already creating your works back then. I started when I was only 12 years old. So the one who figured out the stamp was poisoned, that was... Mr. Justice, it's time. To the courtroom, please. Right. Out of time. Wait, Farah, just one more thing, please. Those 3 paintings in the studio. I painted those as part of my work. Right. See, we checked them out and we saw what was underneath. We saw the rough sketches underneath the 3 finished paintings. I see. Mr. Justice? Yes! Father, he knew of you. Of both of you. Your late father? He was watching, gathering information. All about the Wright & Co. law offices. But lately, we're not doing just law. Yes, you do tricks, gags to amuse and play piano. Well, they aren't really gags. Yet, when Father heard you had resumed the legal business, how pleased he was. Who was Mr. Misham? How am I supposed to know? What if he was Daddy's daddy? Judging from the relative ages involved, I'd say it's highly unlikely. Things are already confusing enough with all these daddies running around. We know that the victim's daughter, Farah, was the forger. What does this mean for the case? I guess we're about to find out. Court is now back in session. Farah seems pretty tense. She's practically chewing her fingernails clean off. Perhaps you could begin by telling us how it all worked. How did you set up this True Mission Forger persona? There's that stare again. She's drilling more holes into his head. I know it's hard for you, but hey, he's a handsome guy. What's hard? Very well, miss. If you would. Did you really make those detestable forgeries? Perhaps you'd rather answer my question. Were you the one who painted that painting? The remarkably similar one? Yes. I painted it, yes. Father praised me quite highly for it. So, she was the one who made the forgeries. Yet, she did not wish to reveal the truth of their operation. So the victim was a stand-in, a decoy. To the world at large, he was the forger, not her. I've done a bad thing. I have, haven't I? Regardless, we need a little more information. About, for instance, this. You have seen this before, yeah? Yes, it was in the desk drawer. Very well, you may proceed with your testimony. Tell us everything you know about this envelope. I created things and Father sold them. This envelope came after my first work that was other than a painting. Father handled the deal, all of it. I received the stamp that was in that envelope. And it was after that job that we moved to the current studio. There certainly was much of great interest in your testimony. Not that the witness realizes it. Very well. Please begin the cross-examination. Right, okay. I need more information about this forger. This Drew Misham. So, these things you were making, you mean paintings identical to other paintings, right? The closer they were, the happier Father was. I was happy too. Still, you're quite young now. When did you begin this work? My first painting sold when I was 12. Your Honor, she had no idea what she was doing was illegal.
Objection!
Easy there, little 30. You're not here to defend her for the crime of forgery. True. Please, tell us more about this envelope. This envelope that may very well have killed your father. All right. This envelope came after my first work that was other than a painting. By other than a painting, you mean you'd only done paintings up to that point? Yes. But Father had a realization. He noticed my talent extended to make things other than paintings. For instance, a letter someone had written, or a fingerprint left upon a cup, or a signature on a document, a seal upon a letter. None of this makes her sound very innocent at all. And the $100,000 promised in this letter was the start. The beginning of a new industry for Drew Mission. A new industry? The creation of items to be used in the criminal proceedings. Forging evidence, in other words. Uh-oh. What do you mean you received it? Did I do something wrong? You didn't use that stamp because it was dangerous, correct? Deadly poison on the back! A troconine!
Objection!
A moment at a forehead. You can't force an answer upon the witness. Now then, perhaps you would tell me, Fraulein Vera, why did you receive this stamp? Is something wrong? It was beautiful. Ah, you mean it was one of those commemorative stamps? Yes, I think it was. So, you didn't know about the poison? I guess not. So the trap failed by chance, by mistake. Thanks to this commemorative stamp. Quite a close call.
Hold it!
You mean you moved to where the current Drew studio is? Yes, we saw very few people there. I began drawing picture books. This single job had tied them to the criminal underworld. I think Mr. Mission wished to reduce their visibility in the world at large. We had to meet someone for some reason. Father posed as the creator of the work. So that was the real essence of the artist's Drew mission. You did the work and he supplied the face. So, you really didn't know anything, did you? You had no idea how much danger you were in. Apparently not. About this commemorative stamp, could you tell us more about it? It was very pretty, and more than that. Yes? It was a picture of people I liked at the time. Is this something new? Apparently, we've got some cross-examination yet ahead of us. If you would be so kind as to continue your testimony, Fraulein. This stamp was a picture of my favorite magicians, so I kept it.
Objection!
Those magicians you liked, was it this bunch? Apollo, they're not a bunch. I see. Still, I have to wonder. Why include a commemorative stamp like that in a business letter? Good question. Well, pretty stamps are always better, and you can't beat true grammary. But the whole murder plan was a failure because of it. Ironic, don't you think? Prosecutor Gavin? Prosecutor Gavin? Grammary! What's with Gavin? Might I ask just one question of this witness? In your testimony just now, you stated this was your first work that was other than a painting. Please, tell me. What exactly did you make? Can I ask what? No! Answer the question! Now! Hey! Well, Prosecutor Gavin, you're usually not the one whose volume concerns me. Yes, it's unbecoming of me. I apologize. But I must know. Please, Miss Mission, tell me. It was a book. A single page in a book. A book! Please be more specific. It was a handwritten book. Like a diary. No! I don't... No! What's wrong with Prosecutor Gavin? He looks like he just saw a ghost. Miss Bisham, this book. Was there a picture of a silk hat on the back cover? Yes or no? How did you know?
Objection!
Prosecutor Gavin, the defendant is answering all of your questions. Stop badgering her. He's told you nothing, has he? Your soiled, studied mentor! Nothing! Sullied who? That's right. Who else? Daddy? He never told you about the trial 7 years ago. About how we came to lose his attorney's badge. It was a certain piece of evidence that decided his fate, you know. A certain diary. On the back, it bore the mark of a silk hat. What?! Phoenix Wright tossed out of the profession by false evidence. And the forger who made that evidence is this girl standing right in front of me! Vera, you must tell us. The evidence you made was used in a trial 7 years ago. Who asked Drew Misham, you, to forge that evidence? For all of our sakes, who was it? We only met once. You met the client. Well, who was it? It was... What's going on with Vera? She's staring at Prosecutor Gavin's face again. Guess what? Is there something about me? I remember clearly. I remember who gave me the book, the diary. Who was it? Vera! Defendant Vera Misham, condition unconscious. Examiner's diagnosis, acute acrotrochronium poisoning. This ends the recording of the trial for the murder of Drew Misham. Vera Misham was, during the trial, poisoned by an unknown assailant. The dosage was just under the lethal amount, sparing the defendant's life. She is currently in intensive care and is not to be disturbed for any reason. A very simple case at first glance. Until it finally began to show its true colors. The long road to the truth takes us to the record of another trial. In some ways, that was the starting point of it all. And that is where we must go. To find the whole truth.